No, can you guys hear me? Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Um, so Aquaworld Community Development Initiative is a youth-led NGO in Nigeria, and it's an organization that focuses on implementing creative solutions to promote marine protection and to enhance marine conservation in Nigeria. The mission of the organization is to empower vulnerable groups and marginalized communities, such as coastal communities in Nigeria, through creative and pragmatic initiatives aimed at marine protection, climate resilience, and environmental enhancement. And we envision thriving coastal communities in Nigeria where marine ecosystem are protected and environmental activities are improved and residents are empowered to lead sustainable livelihood. So the founder of Aquaworld is Mr. Paul Ayomide, and is also on this call. And if maybe anyone has one or two questions about Aquaworld, or you want to join the organization, then you can reach out to him and discuss with him. Yeah, like I said, the focus of the organization is, we focus on marine protection and conservation, community resilience, and to climate change, and youth empowerment and inclusion, capacity building, knowledge sharing, just like what we are having today. So, this is what I just want to share with you guys before we move on to the business of the day. So today we are looking at another interesting topic, another global issue that is, affecting the nations, affecting populations and individual. We are looking at we all know that agriculture is the lifeblood of every nation. Food security is crucial in the development of any country. So, how does the role of pesticide? What is pesticide? What do they do? How do they move? What is their fate and effects in agricultural landscape? And how do they affect biodiversity, aquatic biodiversity? So that is what we are trying to look at today. And we have our guest speaker in our midst today is already here, and he will try to, discuss to us about this issue, and share some limelight about the role of pesticide in agriculture and how it affects aquatic biodiversity. So I want to just quickly pull up the profile um, of our guest speaker, so we know we who is taking us today. Just a very quick um, um okay. Just a moment, please. Share. So today we have a guest speaker by the name Amowie Aimienoho. He's a friend, a brother to me, and he's a master student in ecotoxicology at the Rheinland-Palatinate Technical University, Landau, Germany. His research specializes in aquatic pollution and ecology, with current work on bioremediation of wastewater microparticles, and their ecotoxicological risk. He has a wealth of experiences in assessing pollutant transfer across aquatic terrestrial ecosystems. Amowie obtained his BSc in Animal and Environmental Biology at the Delta State University, Abraka, and conducted the first microcosm study of glyphosate effects on freshwater plankton at the Institute of Ecology and Environmental Studies, Obafemi Awolowo University. He was also secretary of the Environmental Control and Management Student Association in OAU. Amowie champions knowledge sharing, citizen science, and encourage youth engagement in science. He advocates for environmental sustainability through grassroots campaigns and believes in outsmarting global approaches. He is passionate about science communication and seeks innovative strategies to translate water pollution research into actionable insight for African communities. Please, I want us all to welcome our guest today, and as he, take us through the conflict between agriculture and aquatic biodiversity in regards to the role of pesticides. So, and quickly, I want everyone to like a kind of register where you are joining us from, your name. So you can put it in the chat box. So we just have the list of people joining the webinar today. As Mr. Amowie, starts the wonderful presentation on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adetola. It's my pleasure to be here and to see all of you here.
You're welcome.
I'm trying to share my screen now.
Okay.
How is it looking? Do you see it?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
So
perfect.
you can see the screen.
Yeah, just to correct you, my name is Amowie Aimienoho. It's difficult, I know.
Aimienoho. I'm sorry, I should have contacted you and asked how the right pronunciation of your. So don't
It's
worry, I get it now.
it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to discuss this issue with you. And it's agriculture and aquatic biodiversity, the role of pesticides. We all know what agriculture is. It simply involves, let me put it on full
Yeah,
screen.
can you put it on the
Yes.
presenter? Yeah.
So it involves crop production, and this crop production, it's either for food or for money. Another production type is the animal production, which involves meat and the raw materials that we get from meat or from animals in general. The basic two kinds of agriculture as we know it is either a subsistence, that is family based, small scale, just to feed yourself and get a little cash, or it's commercial, very intensive. And this is the major issue with biodiversity today.
Um, the screen is still not in the presenter mode. I don't know.
Wait. Is it now?
Can someone else confirm with me? It's still not in the presenter mode.
No, it's not also from my end.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let me just stop it. How about now? Did it change it?
Yes, yes, yes,
It is now.
yes, yes.
Sorry about that. So the need for agriculture is simply driven by survival of humans. We need to survive, so we need food. And food production happens to be the largest proportion of what is responsible for agriculture today. And when we also do this, we also need to get some materials, some nutrients from agriculture, that is from certain crops or certain plants. But that is not the major driver these days. It is largely economic, the need for export. We know people need to feed, so we also know that there need to be enough production to go around as the population is equally growing. Another major issue is with the industrial raw materials demand. Every time we are demanding new raw materials, many of them from agricultural sources. And we need these things to either provide comfort for ourselves or to also have some kind of new value to the foods that we eat. And of course, as humans, our needs are insatiable. So we keep depending on the nature to provide all of this. And with the nature of our consumption, nature cannot by itself give us enough of all of these materials that we need. Therefore, we end up having to grow these crops or these plants by ourselves. I found this map very interesting. It was looking at hungry people, where are they, and how severe is hunger globally. And if you look at it very well, these green areas, dark green areas, are areas that are said to have very low insufficient food. That is, there are less hungry people in this region. And you could see the entire North America nearly, and most part of Europe, South America is also there, and then the northern part of Africa. On the same map in Africa, if you look closely, you're going to see some red spots. Those are areas with very high hunger, and that means nearly 50%. That is above 40% of the people are in severe hunger conditions. And this is not very good. So it begins to make us to ask ourselves, how exactly are people hungry in this region? But I also found out that it's not just driven by lack of food, though it is lack of food not in the sense of agriculture, but mostly due to problems, geopolitical problems, and those that have to do with violence and wars. However, the northern part of Nigeria is not kind of left out. It's also there with over 30% hunger. So this kind of justify why we need pesticide according to manufacturers or people who believes in the help that pesticides can give to us. So we kind of ask ourselves the same question over and over again. Do low pesticide mean that we are going to be hungry? Or is it that when we have more pesticide application, it's going to mean that we will be less hungry? That means we are going to have more agricultural yield. Soon we're going to try to answer that question by ourselves. Another issue is the issue of human health. We know in the tropics, insects carry a lot of diseases, particularly malaria. And if we do not use pesticide or insecticides to kill this malaria carrying vector, the mosquito, we are going to have more disease burden. And this will automatically translate to more hungry people because they cannot feed for themselves. Some are going to lose their lives in the process. And all of them put together, we tend to give us this low human development index. food sufficiency do not actually mean that the entire country or the entire region is in good health. Given the data by the WHO on obesity, you see many countries, especially US, although that is behavioral, they have a lot of food, a lot of pesticide use, of course, and they also tend to have a lot of high risk of people who could die of obesity. So it's a question of, does having a lot of food mean that the people there are going to be healthy? And we could also see from the same map that there are some countries that are having underweight issues, and these countries are often equally seen to be in a few areas that are not having enough food. But these data do not just say exactly that underweight is directly related to food insufficiency or hunger in the region. Then let's look at the market. Is it really because of food sufficiency globally, or is it just regular economics? Which to me, I want to believe it's both. As we have seen, this is a data by Pesticide Atlas. So they release yearly bulletin on issues of pesticide in different countries around the world. The numbers that you've seen here are in tons of pesticide being used in different regions. And you could see the South America has the highest, and they had a growth from the previous year of over 100%. They used a lot of pesticides there. And this region is particularly Brazil, and this is because of the intensive plantain and banana cultivation that they use over there. Then in Asia, Russia and China and India are the leading areas in this region that have this very high consumption of pesticides. And as regards the market, only four companies do have the highest market bond for these pesticides over the years. And Syngenta, Bayer, Corteva, and BASF, they produce some of the highest globally. And when they make this production, they ship it down to different countries, including in Africa, where we have over 100,000 tons of pesticide that is being used annually. And this is increasing. I was discussing with somebody today, and I was saying 15 years ago, I'm not sure that my community from southern Nigeria was really not dependent on pesticide. But in the last 5 years, I'm seeing a very rapid growth on pesticide use in these small communities. I equally try to look at this data closely to see if we are having more pesticide and less hunger. And the data do not exactly say the same, that more pesticide does not mean you are going to have less hungry people. Even if there is a relationship, it could not always be direct. So it can be, in my opinion, I would think that maybe for countries in developing regions, the global south, it would mean maybe with the pesticide use, they are actually having a better yield. Then what is the problem? Why do we still have a lot of more hungry people? Is it because of storage and processing that all our food that we produce, we just end up in garbage during the peak period? And the off-season periods, we do not have them to eat anymore. Then that period can also be recorded for hunger period. Maybe, you never know. Then for these pesticide, how do they get into the environment? And the entry pathway involves a lot of processes. The first thing is, you can see this man here. spraying the pesticide. And there's also the area spray using helicopter or some kind of special tools. Now they are using drones in Europe that I know of. They are using drones in place of airplanes, but it's basically the same thing. And they could also use tractors just to spray everywhere. So these are the ways that this pesticide will get into the environment. And once they get into the environment, what happens? It's either they are degraded by the sun through a process photolysis. Depending on the formulation of the pesticide, it can quickly vaporize. And when it vaporizes, then it's also oxidized by sunlight. They can also be transported either by wind or by water. That is through erosion and runoff. A considerable amount of it could also go down through the process of leaching and affect groundwater. There could also be a vertical flow or horizontal flow. Horizontal flow will mean that the water from when it's leaching, it can contaminate the groundwater, like the vertical groundwater, and move vertically, and the surface water in that area is contaminated. Or in the vertical form, it goes straight to the water table, of which when the water table is recharged, it gets back to the surface water. And in a few other cases, it could just be an accident or a spill, or the farmer is washing off their tools or their buckets that they used already for pesticide in the adjoining streams. And this is very common, especially in rice farming in Nigeria, for instance. So when you already have these pesticides in the environment, how is it going to affect the biodiversity there? The first thing is going to be the exposure. It has to be there. That is, the chemical needs to get in contact with the biodiversity, and the different ways it can be exposed can be affected by these different parameters, which could be what's the nature of the environment. Is it soil? Is it water? Is it air? And today we are looking more of water. And another thing that can affect how it behaves in the environment is the formulation. How is it formulated? Is it granulated, like it's solid? Is it highly vaporized that you spray? Or the physicochemical parameters, which includes the stability. Is this chemical really stable? A stable chemical will stay more in the environment, and the degradation will take a longer time. And if it's very soluble, that means it can equally dissolve in water so easily. And if it dissolves in water, there are some processes that can take place to make it less toxic. Or the direct effect can already kill aquatic biodiversity there. The log KOW will explain what it does when it gets into the environment. Does it stick to the sediments in the case of aquatic ecosystems? Or it could also easily be dissolved. Most times, chemicals with high log KOW tend to be very less soluble in water. Then when you are releasing, or when the farmers are releasing these chemicals into the field, you also need to ask the question, how is it applied? Is it applied aerially, that is from above the water surface or the land surface? Or is it by the nozzle or the knapsack sprayer, which is just the one you put on your back? Another question is, how frequent is this? And this can result or explain the two kinds of disturbances. And the first one is the press disturbance and pause disturbance. Press disturbance means that the farmer is always applying this chemical, like every time, it's always there. Or the chemical tends to have high stability. That means it can always be persistent or present in the environment that's following a very long time, even after application. It could also be pause, and pause disturbance simply means it is when you apply it that you have a very sharp increase, or maybe there's an event that just occurred, and this event can be like there was high rainfall, there was flooding that washes this pesticide into the adjoining stream. And the interesting part is when you're monitoring for pesticide, you must make sure that you try to cover pause events such as rainfall, because you may go there today, there was no rainfall, everything was looking good. Tomorrow there was a heavy downpour. Then you went there the next day, you found that there was a lot of maybe some fish kills. Some fishes were dead, some insects were dead. But when you measure your water sample, you don't see anything wrong. That's because you have missed a particular event of that rainfall, that during that rainfall, maybe a lot of chemicals were washed down and they have this very acute effect that you could not capture, maybe because of their short half-life. Maybe some of them, they spend just a few hours and they cause serious effects. And when you are measuring the effects, how much volume, like what is the concentration amount that got into the water? And when you want to measure the effect again, you look at the different endpoints. Which toxicity endpoint do you want to use? Most times we just look at, is it dead or alive? That is the LC50. There could be chronic disruption. When it's chronic, that means for a very long time, it's going to be there, the effect is going to be there. And this long time is sometimes just some 20 days or 21 days that we consider chronic effects. And this effect that we look for most times is just, are they surviving? Are they growing? Or are they reproducing? Other effects that are also chronic could be the endocrine disruption effect. EDCs it's a short term for endocrine disruptive chemicals. And these are chemicals that are capable of destroying or disturbing the hormonal balances in the organisms. And you could also have mixture effects. There is not just one kind of pesticide. In the next slide, I'm going to show you the different kinds. There's not just one type, and each type do have their different effects. And when these chemicals come together, we really don't know exactly how they behave in the environment. If it means that 3 chemicals are going to be more toxic than just one chemical, or one chemical would be more toxic if you compared to when you combine the 3 of them, maybe they cancel each other out. Again, we also try to look at the different non-target organisms, and we'll try to conduct tests that says, are these species or the different kinds of organisms, are they reacting in the same manner? And if they are, you also look at, okay, which are the other types of organisms that we did not test and how would they react? Those are the non-target organisms test that these companies are often required by law to do before you sell your pesticide. So when you have this pesticide in the environment, the first thing that usually occurs is volatilization. And this, like I said before, depends on the kind of formulation. If it is liquid, if it's highly vaporized, or if it is maybe solid, which most times they tend to stay longer in the environment. Then the second process that will occur will be photolysis, where the sunlight will try to break down these chemicals. And for some that goes very high up in the ozone region, there's also a kind of degradation that do occur there. But in water, you mostly have hydrolysis. It's simply the addition of the OH group. This is pure chemistry. It's an addition of the OH group. And when this is usually formed, it tends to become more stable and more dissolved and hopefully less toxic in the water system. Then you have the microbial degradation where microorganisms just come and try to reduce it. Sometimes they make it form different complexes that are less toxic. And it's also a function of the half-life of the chemical or the pesticide. Then we want to really look at pesticide. How do they affect aquatic biodiversity? First thing, how do they get there? We've talked about that briefly before, but an unusual way, it's also direct application. In 1991 and 1992, we were trying to create or manage the growth of water hyacinths in Lagos, in some part of Osun State, and I think it extended to Ondo State at that time. And that was the first time it was recorded that glyphosate was used in Nigeria. And the application was majorly aerially, that is, a sort of helicopter was being used to spray the entire area because water hyacinth was really, really a disturbance to the waterways at that time. There could also be runoff where you have rainfall, some kind of flooding events, and accidents. I don't think there's any recorded case in Nigeria yet that is so massive, but there was a case in Calabar. I cannot remember the year, but I think it was in 2020. There was a massive fish kill in Calabar. Up till now, the report did not state what happened. They don't know. They checked for oil, which was suspected. It was not oil pollution. They checked for other chemicals. It wasn't there. We really don't know what happened at that time. But there's a famous case in Europe here. In 1986, November 1st, there was this Sandoz chemical disaster. It began with a fire in the warehouse. About 1,000 tons of the chemicals, different chemicals that were stored in the warehouse, got destroyed, and some of them spilled. Of course, immediately they called the fire service, and the fire service came and they sprayed down everything. So in that spraying process, they were washing down all these chemicals. Many of them were pesticides, including organophosphates that were in use at that time. Parathion was very common then. Thiomethane was also there. Mercury was unusually there at that time. Then there's also this metazoron, which is an organochlorine, very toxic, was also there. In this case, we were just trying to save the building or to prevent more severe complications that will come up following the incident. So the interest was just to put out the fire using water and whatever they had. And that meant spraying water got into the sewage system and everything ended up in the river. And this river was River Rhine. River Rhine, I think it began from Switzerland and it ends, I'm not sure where it ends, but it gets very big. No, in Germany, yeah, before it empties into the ocean. So for several months, the effect of this continued even up to 180 kilometers. I think up to Karlsruhe area, they were still recording the effect after some months. And this effect was not a direct effect anymore. The direct effect was very quick, and that happened between the first 3 days. Later on, some animals were responding differently. Then it took about 3 months. The dogs, somewhere around Karlsruhe, started dying. Then the question was, what is killing these dogs? What is happening? And they had to conduct a study and to see that it was actually in the food chain. What happened in 1986, at that time in November, the effect remained until the middle of 1987. that they could record. When the duck feed on the mussels feed on plankton, like that. So you have this buildup of accumulation, and this was why they recorded this effect. And in reaction, what they quickly did was to have the Rhine Action Program just that next year, because the effect was really, really great. There are other ways that pesticides will get into aquatic environment, and this could be through deposition, that's like rainfall, or global transport systems and the sewage. The global transport systems is driven by wind and temperature. That means that if I spray a particular pesticide here in Germany, over time, somewhere, somehow, it can get to Africa. And this is because of this grasshopper effect. When we look at pesticides and how they affect biodiversity, most times the question is, how do we even want to assess all of these things? Remember that these companies, they must make sure that they satisfy both the legal systems or the frameworks before they are able to sell their chemicals to the open market. So before they've been registered, they are essentially have to be responsible for ecotoxicological testings. And most times what they do is the standard test. Pick a particular organism, check if it dies after it is placed in an environment that is contaminated with this chemical. Later on, researchers started saying, no, this does not really give you the ideal effect of this chemical. So they started using non-standard test model. That means instead of using the Daphnia, which they often use, they said, let's use something else. Let's use fish. Let's use some kind of rotifer. Let's use mussels, different kinds of organisms. But it's still highly debated whether non-standard model organisms are necessary for registration or not. And when they do all of these tests, they try to look at what are the effects. Is it just the lethal effect, whether it dies or it's alive, or whether it's surviving, or whether they can reproduce, or the hormones are affected? All these effects can be passed from parents to children. This is usually done at the individual level. Then some people also came up and say, we cannot just tell because they are individual traits. A can survive better than B. We may not really know why. So they started looking at growth dynamics. You put them together, maybe you have them reproduce, and you look at how they react or how they perform in the presence of these chemicals. It's highly complex. In nature, it's different. Nature is not a lab that you can just control the temperature, you control the wind, you control everything. It is not. So in other ways, they try to see how they can make a kind of extrapolation from the lab studies into the field. Remember that before any chemical is being sold or permitted to get into the field, it must undergo all of these things. And you cannot just spray chemicals just because you want to check the effect on the environment. So they highly depend on these laboratory testing and extrapolation. One of the ways is, let's see how the community will react. So they use some aquatic invertebrates, sometimes vertebrates that include fish. They put them in the system, not just one species, usually up to 5 species. They put them together and they see how each of them are going to respond to this chemical. Again, there's a new model that people are trying to really use. It's relatively new, maybe less than 20 years. And that is the dynamic energy budget. It's a theory trying to simulate how much energy is required for growth, for reproduction, and for normal body maintenance. And they try to do this under the influence of these chemicals. But there are gaps. Like I said before, nature is not a laboratory. So you have different other stressors there. You have other chemicals coming from different sources. You cannot account for everything. There is also the network of food chain or food web in this case. It is really complex that a simple calculation or extrapolation cannot really work. Then if you think you are able to cover these things, the question is, how about predator avoidance? For instance, I'm an insect and you spray me with insecticide, I did not die. I could be weak, that when a bird is coming, I can jump, I cannot fly. So I'm predisposed. That cannot be explained in the lab easily. And you also have community dynamics, where a particular population goes up and the other one comes down, and the other one goes up and the other one comes down, following that kind of a cycle. Sometimes we really don't know what are driving this, but we can try to assume that we know. There's also the resilience, like every community or every system, when they go down, they'll be able to come back up again. But in the effect of pesticides, this may not be true anymore. But this cannot easily be explained given the short time that is needed for this test. Because, of course, they're in a hurry. They quickly want to put their products in the market. Knowing fully well, food chain is never equal to food web. Food chain is really linear, but food webs, much more complex and complicated. So in ways that they continue to see if it is possible to really put out what they know in the lab and see how it performs in nature. So they try to bring up some modelings, which are very good and brilliant, by the way. But according to Judge Box, that all models are wrong, but some can be useful. So models are just some mathematical assumptions that is supported by your test and by the power of your statistics. It usually begins from the first stage, which is at the species level. You do that in your lab. This is where you do your Lido test to know if it kills it or it doesn't kill it, if they will survive or they will not survive. From there, you move to the second stage, which is usually based on the chemical environmental concentrations. And you try to bring more organisms together. It is where you have this different kind of species put together and see how they are going to perform. Then there's another stage, which usually is the final stage. They just say, oh, how will these different species, how will they perform? And how will the energy dynamics look like? And that is based on the dynamic energy budget. That's the energy that is required for body maintenance, for growth, and for reproduction. All of these involves some kind of complex mathematics, and some smart people put all of this together. All we are trying to do is to know how nature will react to pesticides. And they developed in particular, three kinds of toolboxes that usually really work so far. And the first one is the quantitative structure activity relationship. And this is going to help them to predict how this pesticide is going to behave in the environment. And it is based on the chemical properties of each of the compound. So we try to assume here that, okay, if we know if this compound have this long half-life, this is how it's going to behave in the environment. If this compound has a low pH, this is how it's going to behave in the environment. And all of these models are put together and they try to guess how truly it's going to behave in this environment if it gets there. The other model is the toxicokinetic models. It can be a simulation of physiology, and that is based on the pharmacokinetics of the compound or the chemical in use. And it's assumed that they follow the same pathway, which is the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion processes. Finally, the dynamic energy budget modeling is also applied here. This is how a typical aquatic food web looks like. Generally, you have your, just ignore the fact that it's an effluent, but for the sake of this talk, let's consider this to be the pesticide source. So if you have your pesticide gets into the water, it's going to affect the primary producers, the ones that depend on that, which are the larvae of the herbivorous insects, and somehow some fish also feed on that. The larvae can emerge, and it's also a food to other kinds of animals that are also around there. Then it could also just build up on the system where you have predatory insects that is feeding on the larvae of different kinds of insects, and you have fish that is feeding on this insect, and some phyto or zooplankton, which are other small plants and animals that you cannot easily see with your naked eye. Then if you look at this arrow, this is a clear explanation of bioaccumulation. And bioaccumulation is simply defined as the buildup of different chemicals or a particular chemical in the food chain, and it goes from usually the primary producer up to the tertiary or the secondary consumer. So it can be from the algae to the small insects to the fish to a bigger fish, then to something that feeds on that fish, which can be a bird or humans. We also feed on fish too. If we want to look at how this agricultural practice and aquatic biodiversity are related, we can easily see that there is a negative relationship between both of them. Pesticides, particularly insecticides, of course, they are designed to kill insects. We shouldn't be surprised when we see that there are insect declines everywhere. Recently, there was a study in Kenya that shows, I don't have that report here, but it clearly showed that Kenya over the years have been having a lot of insect decline, but their interest was mostly on the insects that the people consume. In Germany, there was also a study that saw that insects are, I think about 42% of their insects have disappeared over the past 50 years. That is just a direct effect. There is also this non-direct effect that you really cannot trace. It could be in form of the food web is being changed or modified such that food is no longer available to the next person or the next guy in the food chain. And like that, so where they don't have food for the top chain, in this case, maybe for a fish in an aquatic system, the effect may not necessarily be arising from maybe the fish is not reproducing or it's a direct toxic effect on the fish. It could be food, that insects are not having enough food, maybe because that area had been sprayed with herbicides. So they don't have enough food. And when they don't have enough food, the next person up the ladder will equally not have enough food. And in cases where you have shortage of food, most times, most animals will respond by not wanting to reproduce anymore. Whereas a few others will want to try to reproduce so that they can continue their life cycle. There's a famous example with neonicotinoids. It greatly affected macroinvertebrates, especially insects. Before the registration of this insecticide, they did a study with the regular Daphnia, which they did. It was very safe. But somebody did another study, and said this is not really safe for the other kinds of insects that we have in the water systems. Then there was a large study that was conducted, and they saw that over 75% of caddis, that's caddisfly and mayflies, were negatively affected by these neonicotinoids. Then another study came up again that this neonicotinoid, even though it was safe for use based on the kind of study that they did and it was approved for, it's also the leading cause of deaths in bees globally. So this was why neonicotinoids were banned in the EU some years ago, not so long ago, maybe 5 years, but it's less than 10 years ago. Another example is the atrazine effect on amphibians. Atrazine became known to be an endocrine disrupting chemical, such that it was changing the sex of frogs and toads, such that a male toad would behave like a female. A female would, in some cases, behave like a male. So that change was making it impossible for toads and frogs to easily reproduce. And it was not just limited to frogs alone. There were other amphibians that are aquatic that were equally affected. So the effect was not direct. Instead, it was indirect, and that was done by suppressing their ability to reproduce. Another one was glyphosate, stimulating algal blooms. This is related to what I studied one time in 2012. I also found that it was the same thing, where you apply glyphosate, you are going to have algal bloom, which means you're going to have a lot of green algae everywhere. And this can change the population dynamics of that area, or even the community dynamics of the area that you have this. And in turn, what you are going to have is a change in niche. You are not going to have some animals where you have a high amount of certain kinds of algae. Then this can equally result in habitat loss and degradation. Where you have farming, of course, you are breaking the natural system. So you're going to fragment this habitat, and you're not going to have a lot of good condition for any of these biodiversity to flourish. Why it is important for aquatic organisms is the fact that there are some aquatic organisms like the dragonfly, the mayflies and caddisflies, for instance. They have their larvae in the aquatic systems. So when they want to lay eggs, they go to the aquatic systems and they lay eggs. So the egg is going to hatch there and gets to all the different stages, and eventually it will emerge as an adult. So if there's a problem in the aquatic system, you are not going to be having a lot of emergence, and this will therefore affect their population. Again, what are actually the reality like? What is true there? What do we know that are really problematic when it comes to biodiversity decline? Pesticides, as well, they now call it plant protection products so that it wouldn't sound so bad, because we all are looking at pesticides very bad. So if you say plant protection products, it may make subtle sense that it's not so bad. So we will not be surprised if this is a driver of biodiversity loss, because it is carefully designed to kill biological organisms. Therefore, based on conservation of molecular structures, that is, we are all kind of, I don't know what you believe in, whether evolution or not, but we share some kinds of molecular structures with every other species. So if a particular chemical is capable of interfering with the behavior or neurologic behavior of an insect, if we as humans consume that same or we are exposed to the same chemical, we are also going to respond like that, just like the way that insect will do. So the difference between us and insects reaction is just going to be how much exposure that we had, how much quantity were we exposed to, and our biomass, like how big are we? I'll give you an example of how, I don't know if there's any German here, but it's a sad one. During the war in 1946, there were some chemical companies, and they call them the union guys, and they include the Bayer, BASF was also part of it, and two others that are no longer in existence. There were five of them. They had their head office in Frankfurt. Oh, sorry. All right. All right. Sorry. Sorry for that. There was a slight push somewhere. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So in Frankfurt, that's where they had their head office, and they were trying to develop some insecticides. They had some very good chemists there. Somehow the information got to the military then, and the military approached them and said, yeah, we heard you are trying to do something that can kill insects. And they said, yes, our scientists are working on it. I said, can this same thing kill humans? And they were like, well, that is not what we are doing, or that is not why we are doing it. So, but we want to know if it can. And they gave in and they said, yes, it can, if only we increase the concentrations. And somehow they compromised. And this was the birth of the nerving gas, or the nerve gas that they were using to poison humans. So, and the reason it worked is because we are not so molecularly different, even as humans compared to insects. It was the same effect that it will have on insects that it was having on we humans. So the problem was, or the difference was simply how much do we have to be exposed to before we react in the same way. In 2006, the United Nations Environment Program gave a report that says out of the 28,000 species that are currently at risk, 24,000 of them is driven by agricultural practices. And this practice includes habitat fragmentation, because we need to farm, then we need to cut off everything, we need to remove everything and plant only what we want. So we are reducing the habitat diversity, thereby that results in diversity loss. Not just that we do, we also apply a lot of chemicals. Pesticides is just one of them. We equally apply that, and that is also affecting how much biodiversity that we have there. And these effects cannot easily be quantified because they are not direct effects. This is why many of these companies, they are going to be able to deny that, no, it is not because of our product. But it could be that you are applying a herbicide to kill plants, and you have these insects that depend on plants. So they no longer have food that they should eat. Then they die. It could be insecticide that you spray, and this insecticide could kill other organisms. But you also say, no, you did your test right, and it is not correct. So instead of it to fix the problem, they end up trying to argue. And when they do this, you usually know that something is wrong, because science doesn't Well, it's not perfect, but it doesn't just lie. You had the facts. If you have issues, then you can conduct a refined study to address that particular issue. The idea of any pesticide, according to the 2009 directive by the EU, was that the pesticide should not have no unacceptable effects in the environment and its ecosystems. But this is not what we have. What we have is direct effect and indirect effect. So the issue is just how are we going to be able to prove this as scientists or as people who are involved in environmental sustainability, to the point that there should be actions taken against companies that manufactures this and they sell it. Another issue is how much chemicals that are really out there. There are a lot of them that have been produced and exported. Some of them have been banned in the EU. They are transported or exported for money to developing countries, especially Africa and Southern Asia. The saddest part of it, in my opinion, is that we have very high biodiversity in the tropics. This is also where you have the global south countries that depend on European or the American pesticides. But we also don't study our biodiversity that well. We don't know how many there are. We also don't know how much is no longer there. Maybe when we are going to realize, it may not be too late, but we have lost a very significant amount of our biodiversity, particularly in the aquatic systems. So these are some selected facts. And since the 1970s, up to 83% of freshwater vertebrates, the vertebrate populations, they've declined. More than 83%. Anyway, this is not species, they are populations, but it's significant. That means we no longer have enough number of species that were there in 1970 compared to now. This is a short period. You also have 1/3 of freshwater fish species that are at risk of extinction. That is 1/3. It's really bad. Given this also, there's a current project that is still ongoing. It's been ongoing, I think, for about 10 years, following the accident in Switzerland, which I explained to you just now, that Europe no longer have enough salmon fish. And this is because of not just chemicals, but there are also some physical reasons anyway. But pesticides and farming, habitat fragmentation have been the leading cause of this loss. It's been there, and they're still trying to figure out what they can do. With this program that they are doing, they are reintroducing salmon fish into the systems. And according to the person who is responsible in this particular region, the last time we talked, this was sometime last year, he said the results are not so good, but at least the population is coming up compared to what we used to have. And more than half of the global surface waters that we have, they usually exceed regulatory pesticide limits. That means half of our freshwater sources that we use both for drinking, for other activities, they are all exceeding what the regulatory authority says. For example, the regulatory authority says you need to have just like 5% or 5 parts per million of this chemical in your water. We are having more than that. And this is really a huge problem for aquatic lives and human lives in these regions. There was a large-scale study that was done in 2013, and I think Adetola, we know one of these persons, Stehel, the risk assessor guy, and with RAF, they did a study, and they detected that in all the waters that they observed in the different countries, 97% of them had concentrations that were not safe. Part of this had led to 42% of aquatic insect population reduction in Germany, thereby reducing biomass by up to 90%. So you're going to have rivers that are not able to support themselves. It's a matter of time the system will crash if nothing is done. And lastly, there's also an amphibian decline. This is not just for the European waters, it's in general. And chemicals that arise from agricultural use is a major reason why you are having this. To conclude, we look at solutions like what can we do? Yes, we need food, we need agriculture, but we don't want to lose biodiversity because we need to feed, because it's going to get to a point where we can, maybe we will not be able to even have this food to eat anymore, or we'll just destroy the entire balance of the earth or of nature. And some of the ways, it's not so many, it's just few that I'm able to think about. And one of them is to improve the structures that we use to prevent pesticides from getting into aquatic systems. The first one is create an area that you do not spray. And that can be a buffer strip. Or if you must spray, you need to construct an area. They call it constructed vegetative wetlands, CVW, where you just create an area close to the river or close to the stream, such that when you spray, it is an erosion. It doesn't go directly into the aquatic system, so that you won't have a lot of losses in the aquatic biodiversity. So that place is acting like a sink tank where it will just keep all your chemicals until it is filled up, then it is gradually released into the adjoining rivers. So there is also the quest for integrated pest management, which involves the use of biological control, use other insects to control insects. And this is what they've been using, and it's been used for the control of other insects using ladybug. Ladybug is really good at this. So it helps to keep other insects in check. In general, we should reduce how much pesticide that we use. And like what you are doing, continue informing and educating farmers, citizens on the need to protect the aquatic systems, because we all depend on the biodiversity there indirectly for our own human health. We consume products that come from the rivers. And through bioaccumulation, we can also have pesticide in us. Not even we all bear a burden of pesticides currently in our bloods. So thank you so much for your time. And I'm hoping that you have more actions in this regards.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you so very much for the wonderful presentation. It was very, very like packed with a lot of information and knowledge. Thank you so much. Yeah, maybe I should just ask, do we have questions? Is there anybody that wants to ask any question regarding the presentation? It seems that there is no question, and seems everybody understood everything that was, the knowledge that was impacted. So thank you so much, Mr. Amowie. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation to, speak to us today. I'm really, 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 really delighted that you are able to join us today. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone that participated and joined us for this webinar. I hope that you were able to learn one or two things about the role of pesticide and how. Okay. Okay, yes, I think there's one question. Femi, Oluwa Femi, yeah, you can unmute and ask your question. Hello? Do, do you want to ask a question, Oluwa Femi? Okay, I'm sorry. So there's no question. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. I really do appreciate your time, and yeah, and I hope that you join us for the next month's webinar. Is there no other? Mr. Paul, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say very big thank you to our speaker. Thank you so much. And for those who are able to join live here on Zoom, thank you to everyone. And those who will be joining through YouTube, because the session will also be streamed on YouTube because we have so many viewers who visit our YouTube channel. We're going to be updating it. And once that has been done, I believe the moderator can also copy the link and share it with the speaker for reference purpose. So we appreciate this. And also after it has been properly published on YouTube, we're going to share it with our mailing list for movie. But it's a very, very interesting topic because it's important to understand the nexus between agriculture versus aquatic biodiversity. It has been a discussion for a very, very long time, and we are so happy to have this discussion. Like, it's a very, very timely one. Thank you very much to our moderator. Thank you to those that joined live here on Zoom and those that will streaming it on YouTube. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, our guest speaker. I really do appreciate your time. So until we meet again next month for another interesting ocean leadership series, I wish you guys a very good evening or a wonderful evening and a happy weekend. Yeah. Bye. Yeah.